I've been hanging out today in the town of Sykesville, Maryland, testing the Fujifilm X-T200, and we'll have some pictures to share for that. By and large, I've been liking what I've been seeing with the camera as far as photography is concerned. I have been a little less than impressed with, however, the video functionality, specifically in video, the face detection and auto tracking and motion tracking of people. And that's a problem for what I intend to use this camera for, which is, or what I would intend to use this camera for, which is vlogging and basically having a camera that I can carry around with me without having to have a big camera, and also be able to do some quick vlogging. I want something a little better than my phone. That said, to this point, the thing that has worked the best for the vlogging portion that I've tried has been my Pixel 4 XL. A little frustration there, but by and large, it's just done what I've asked it to do. So right now, this should be on face tracking. I don't see the green square around my face, and so I have no idea whether or not I'm in focus. And we'll know when I get back and we all see this together. Okay, so I'm in the car. I've been spending the day hanging out in Sykesville, Maryland, which is a historic town on the Howard-Carroll County line, and very interesting history here, a very neat little town. I've been testing, as you know, Fujifilm's X-T200 and also the newer 15 to 45 millimeter f3.5.56 OIS VZ lens as a combo. I've also done some shots today with some of my other X-mount lenses, and so I've got a brief summation of this camera. I really wanted to like this camera a lot, and as a photography camera, I think it borders on brilliant in a lot of ways. There's some really neat features or functions for beginning photographers, photographers coming over from a smartphone. The touch interface and the touch screen on this camera is undoubtedly the best I've ever seen, and I think it's probably about the best in the business. It's big, it's bright, it's quite touch responsive. It can be somewhat customized. Being an inexpensive camera, it does not have all of the customization ability that many of the other Fujifilm cameras do. But you can customize a couple of the touch points on the display. You can customize the buttons. You can do two of the buttons. You can customize one of the dials. Everything else, despite what some folks have said about this camera, everything else pretty much falls in where it ought to be in a camera. So what are the weak points of this camera? The weak points, quite frankly, are the autofocus. The autofocus system, especially when you're trying to use facial tracking, is very hit or miss. It does seem to be tracking me most of the time now, but I'm sure you're noticing that the light levels are fluctuating some, and maybe focus a little bit too. Right now I'm sitting in my car and I'm watching as the face detection block jumps all over the place. It seems to have detected a second face, which is actually it's over my right shoulder. In that back window of the car, there's a bush back there, and sometimes it thinks that's a face, and I watch the little block jump over there. Otherwise, it just loses me altogether. Now, I don't know if it's because maybe I'm too close, maybe I'm not looking at it just right, but quite frankly, the tracking autofocus on this camera is terrible. I don't know, I've never really tried the tracking autofocus on my X-T1. I never tried it on the X-E2, and I don't remember if I tried it on the X-E1 or not. But I can't imagine it being any better than this, since they're much older cameras. Now, this supposedly has an autofocus system that is very similar to what's coming out on the X-T4. It's got 425 or up to 425 phase detect autofocus points. In video mode, I think it only uses 117 of those, but even so, it should still be able to lock in on me and keep me in focus. But it just doesn't seem to want to keep locked in, and it doesn't seem to matter in my tests so far what the lighting conditions are. So that's going to be a real problem with this camera for a vlogging camera. A couple other things, they did see fit to include a mic jack, and that's great. I'm not using it at the moment because I'm in a fairly controlled environment, and I think the camera mics will probably be fine for this. We'll know when I get back and check in post. One thing I do know, though, is that the mic preamps, or at least I've been told, that the mic preamps are not all that great in this, and that you need to run the gain way down. So I recorded some back now with about the audio inputs. The preamps are supposed to be pretty bad. You have to run the gain way down to get clean audio with these. So I did a couple recordings with the audio gain down. I do know that from a level standpoint they're really quiet, so when I bring them up in post we'll see how much noise comes up with them. I don't know for myself how the clips recorded with an external mic sound without doing that. The other thing I wanted to talk about real quick is I'm also testing, as I've said, the new 15 to 45 power zoom lens, and for still photography I guess it's fine. It seems to be sharp, it seems to focus accurately, it seems to be relatively usable. I do find that it feels cheap. The zoom ring, the power zoom ring is I feel like it's not always noticing that I've turned it. It's not always reliable. It also is not always predictable. You do tend to overshoot or undershoot with the zoom. It's like using an inexpensive point-and-shoot camera zoom rocker, and from that standpoint it makes it a little difficult to use. When you're using zoom and you're not in manual focus mode, the other ring on the lens switches over to be a zoom control. It's a little better, but it does not zoom smoothly. As a result, or maybe because of this, Fuji has disabled any kind of power zooming with this lens when you're shooting video, and that is a real showstopper as far as the lens is concerned. It's very nice to be able to do a nice zoom when you're shooting video, and with this lens camera combination, and I think it's probably down to as much the lens as it is the camera, you just can't do that. And that, as I said, is definitely one of the showstoppers, and that's a shame, because otherwise the lens is pretty nice. I think the older 16 to 50 XC lens would be a better choice as a kit lens for most people, or maybe not, I don't know, but I do know that this seems to be a problem with a number of cameras where you've got a power zoom that just won't zoom while you're recording. The same was true with that with the Sony RX10 Mark IV. That's a top-of-the-line bridge camera. In certain instances, you can't zoom and do another function at the same time. I think in that particular case, it is trigger the autofocus and zoom. You can't do them at the same time. And for me, as when you're trying to work quickly or trying to get a particular result, that becomes a showstopper, becomes a big problem. So again, the lens, while sharp or seemingly sharp, and an interesting or decent focal length range, is unfortunately unusable for what I would want to be using it for. There's two other things that are issues with this camera. One I kind of knew about going in the door, and that is the Fuji's typical bad battery life. I actually was pretty impressed with this, considering how much screen use, chimping, and other things I was going to be doing today. I did get, probably 3 hours of shooting. Well, I take that back. Yeah, 2 hours of shooting, both video and stills, constant use. Out of a single battery, and there might have been about 15-20 minutes on the battery before I came out. What did surprise me, and maybe I should have expected this too, is this camera is fairly prone to overheating. I've been shooting, as I said, for 2 to 3 hours today, and I did notice that the overheat warning came on, and that last video was not so much interrupted by the battery dying, although it was getting low, but by the fact that the camera overheated. I've never had a Fuji camera overheat before, and I've had 4 of them. I still have my original X10. It has never overheated. I still have an X-T200, which I love and use. It's never overheated no matter what I've done. The X-E1 and the X-E2 never overheated. And I think that probably comes from this being a plastic-bodied camera. It's not really all that hot out today. It's probably in the 80s. And it is in the 80s, and it's really not that warm as far as I'm concerned. I did get the camera to restart. It's still showing me an overheat warning, so it will probably shut down again on me. Hopefully this actually records the video cleanly when it shuts down. Otherwise I've lost 5 or 10 minutes of recording. So anyway, I think that's going to end it for today and for this shoot. I will probably take a few more pictures with it tonight. There are a couple of features that I want to try out. Autofocus and overheating issues are definitely going to limit its usefulness for me as not just a vlogging camera, but a camera in general, and certainly certainly for video. Autofocus during still photography was pretty typically Fujifilm, right on. So far I've liked the colors that I've seen from this. I've liked everything else that I've seen, but just overheating autofocus in video and the possibility of horrible mic preamps is going to be a showstopper. So anyway, that's it for now. Wrap up on this. It looks to me like I'm still going to be in the search for my perfect vlogging camera.